Hello everybody, today I'll be reacting to The Black Watch, Dying is for Other People. I think this is BattleTech, which means I have absolutely no idea about it.
Generally speaking, in fiction, it's quite
So yeah, I don't know anything. Check out PancreasNoWork. If you enjoy this, subscribe to me, and let's go.
common to see the bodyguards of someone important not only be weaker than them, but generally bad at their jobs. In the end, they'll fail to protect the important guy, though to be fair, not
Yeah.
necessarily for lack of trying. Like the Custodes. Remember how well they protected the Emperor? They protected him so good that he died as much as someone like him can. Quite frequently, in
Yeah.
fact, bodyguards don't even
Yeah.
put a good showing of things. I know he ordered them out, but remember Palpatine's dope-looking guards in Return of the Jedi? They didn't fight, they didn't even storm in to protect the Emperor when things got
No.
screamy and lightningy.
They were
left
just,
and
nope.
Palpatine got tossed down a tube. Sure, in both the EU and Disney canons he came back, but it hardly looks good for their record. Sometimes you should ignore your
No.
boss and come see if things are actually alright. And then we have the Royal Black Watch of House Cameron. On paper, they didn't break the mold much. To give you some spoilers, they failed to protect Richard Cameron from Fat Genghis Khan, and his coup of the Star League was successful. At least until an angry Russian beat the hell out of him for over 10 years straight. But once you scratch the
I don't know anything about BattleTech, so I will just one question it. I watched this other video about it. I don't remember anything about it though.
You'll see that the Royal Black Watch was quite frankly the best bunch of bodyguards you could ask for in all of fiction. Let's take a look, shall we?
Let's
the Royal
see.
Black Watch actually has its history in our own real world. BattleTech has a lot
Ah.
of things like that. Did you know that General Motors invented the first fusion power plant in 2020? Isn't that retroactively really funny? The Black Watch, at least for now, doesn't really need any reality checks like General Motors apparently does, because in BattleTech lore, they weren't really doing anything until about 350 years into the future. Their real-world history is actually pretty interesting, having served all the way back from the 1700s to modern times. And if the British Army was deployed somewhere, the Black Watch wasn't far behind. To keep this from becoming a propaganda video for a country I don't even live in, I'm going to stop the history lesson there and direct you to Wikipedia for more information on the current Black Watch.
I'm sad.
In BattleTech, the Black Watch had been doing its thing for quite some time, being a Royal Regiment of Scotland, when the Star League was formed in the year 2571. It was, of course, necessary to put together a group of bodyguards to keep the ruling noble house of Star League safe, that being House Cameron. Evidently, the Black Watch decided that they were up to the task and became officially known as the Royal Black Watch Regiment. To bring them up to full strength and help make them even more good at what they would do, they would frequently recruit members from the best mech warriors of the Northwind Highlanders, themselves a mercenary unit who were also descended from the Scottish.
Straight up just
In
fucking
universe,
Scottish
if you're
people.
about to enter combat and hear bagpipes, do yourself a favor and find anything else to do instead. You'll live longer. The Black Watch during this time would become the cream of the crop of the Star League's mech warriors, putting themselves through ruthless training to ensure that the ruler of pretty much all of humanity that mattered would never be endangered. There was this thing called the Gunslinger program. Imagine the training Navy SEALs or the SAS members go through. Now put whatever image you have in your head on crack and have the end result require the trainee to be proficient in everything from fistfights to shootouts to beating the snot out of giant robots with another giant robot. Every Black Watch member was a graduate of this program, if not a highly proficient combatant already for those second-handed from the Northwind Highlanders, and it showed in their unrivaled combat prowess. This was, of course, highly necessary. Though during the Star League era, humanity was nominally at peace with itself, it had come to be ruled by feudal houses reminiscent of medieval times. To hugely simplify things, due to the massive distances between planets and FTL communication not being omnipresent early on, this ended up being how the future shaped itself in BattleTech. And the great houses certainly got up to some good old-fashioned medieval politicking, i.e. marriage, warfare, and of course, assassination. The second-to-last First Lord of Star League, and yes, I know the title of First Lord makes talking about who came when an absolute pain in the ass, was indeed almost certainly murdered by a rival. If you're wondering how the Black Watch can possibly be as badass as I initially claimed them to be given all this, I'll get to it. Also, the guy I just mentioned was killed because someone sabotaged the industrial mech he was piloting at the time during a visit to some miners. Not really a problem you can fix by shooting at it, unless your method of defending your liege is obliterating the thing he's joyriding in. Now we get to the final First Lord of Star League, and soon the moment that would ensure the Black Watch would become legend. To give you context so you understand what the hell was happening, my predominantly Warhammer-based audience, the son of the last guy, Richard II of House Cameron, inherited the throne at quite a young age due to his father's assassination. Growing up without any parental figures, his only real guiding hand was his
Oh no. Not the fatherless rulers. This is gonna end up bad, isn't it? Amaris ruins everything for fuck's sake.
General Alexander Kerensky of Star League. And while Kerensky was a good man and stellar general, parenting evidently wasn't his thing. To be fair, he also had his duties as a general to take care of, so despite his best efforts, he couldn't always be there for Richard.
Multitasking.
Who was always there for Richard was a slimy bastard known as Stefan Amaris. Fat Genghis Khan has come to the stage, and just like Erebus, he is going to fucking ruin.
I have fucking several Roman Empire flashbacks. Several.
Win everything. Over the course of several years, he would get close to Richard, taking on whatever role he needed to be at the time to earn his trust. Be it a quote-unquote guiding hand, a yes man, a confidant, and most importantly for the lonely Richard, a friend. This was, of course, all total bullshit. Amaris' plan was to take Richard's place as the First Lord of Star League. Gaining Richard's trust, he would convince the First Lord of various different things to ensure his coup could take place without a hitch. He got him to remove all Star League defense forces from his home nation, the Rimworld Republic. When SLDF forces were engaged in combat elsewhere in the periphery and needed more and more troops, Amaris would generously allow him use of the Rimworld Republic military to garrison Terra and the rest of the Terran hegemony's planets to free up SLDF to go fight. And as a constant companion of Richard, who was gaining more and more of his trust, he was allowed to do pretty much whatever he wanted around the Imperial Palace. It got to a point that when he showed up to meet Richard with an entire entourage of bodyguards armed to the teeth, no one thought this was out of the ordinary. And before he took his bodyguards to Richard's palace, he had gotten one final preparation complete. He had once again sent his forces in to guard Terra, outnumbering the remaining SLDF forces on the planet by 2 to 1. With everything set in place, Amaris took his bodyguards to the throne room, gave Richard a jewel-encrusted laser pistol as a present, and then used it to shoot Richard right in the head before assuming control of Star League and renaming it the Amaris Empire. You can see in this lovely picture on screen now. Richard's headless corpse is also present, but YouTube would probably demonetize me for showing a piece of art from a fictional universe because
it definitely
it's a
would.
bit violent. So I'm afraid you'll have to use your imagination to get the full picture.
I'll do.
Google Images. Years and years of preparation,
That.
countless billions spent on military equipment and training, all led up to this moment. Amaris, for all his insanity and assholery, had executed Richard flawlessly. Of course, as he was soon to find out, the hard part was only just beginning, because now the Black Watch was about to enter the ring. The moment Amaris fired his pistol that probably cost more to make than most people will see in their lives, the palace's alarms rang out. Suddenly, the Royal Black Watch was kicking into action. Their infantry began immediately storming the palace to reach the First Lord and turn Amaris into something more resembling a pulled pork sandwich than a human being. Amaris had brought his best soldiers alongside him as protection, and they were only just barely able to keep him from getting vaporized by a group of soldiers who think a brick of C4 is the same thing as a frag grenade. His bodyguards were soldiers who had trained and drilled extensively for this exact scenario, and the moment the time came to throw down, the Black Watch were quick to inform them that their place in life was to be fertilizer. While Amaris was busy recalling his pants brown and trying his best to stay out of the way of the murderous psychopaths intended on making him an unpleasant memory, the rest of the Black Watch was beginning to awaken at Fort Cameron, their home base. 9 mechs that were kept on standby immediately sallied out of the fort under the command of Colonel Hani Schmidt, while the rest of the Black Watch
they're about to fuck shit up.
was busy preparing to enter combat, activating their own mechs and equipment and getting ready to turn this coup into a failed one. Tragically, Amaris' preparations had extended to them too, for he was of nothing else thorough. There were 2 things he knew with certainty about the Black Watch.
He has a very
have to fight them tooth and nail to succeed, and he really didn't want to do that. And so, as the rest of the Black Watch was about to enter combat, Amaris had a nuke dropped on top of their heads. Ignoring the infantry already storming the palace, active Black Watch combatants went from regimental strength to 9 mechs lucky enough to already be active and marching to battle. Amaris wasn't done yet either. All around Terra, the forces he brought were engaging the surprised and outnumbered garrisons in place. His finest forces, the 4th Amaris Dragoons, were beelining it towards their leader. A good thing too, because every second it took them was another second the Black Watch were getting closer and closer. The 9 remaining Black Watch positioned themselves at Puget Sound in the Gorse Flats, and as the night dragged on, prepared themselves for the fight against the Dragoons. Here's a picture of Puget Sound, because it is a real-world location. The Black Watch chose their fighting grounds well. On the one hand, there was water, which you can't really walk a mech through, and on the other, there was forest. The Dragoons were forced to fight against the Black Watch head-on in a space that meant their vastly superior numbers meant very little. Nevertheless, to say the odds were against the defenders of House Cameron was an understatement. All the Dragoons had to do was wipe out the last 9 mechs standing between them and Amaris, and the coup would be assured. The Black Watch, meanwhile, had to face off against an enemy that vastly outnumbered them, who had preparing their lives for this exact moment to help their lord's psychotic delusions come to fruition, and who, quite frankly, hated everything the Black Watch stood for. It wasn't even a close fight. As infantry and things like tanks or helicopters poured in, they would immediately be cut down and stomped flat by the Black Watch. When the Dragoons brought their mechs to the field, the Black Watch would either be waiting for them the moment they cleared the tree line,
300,
or
I
would
guess.
fade away into the tree line as if they were never really there until the time was right, and then jump the Dragoons the moment their guard was down. Take notice of the Black Watch paint scheme of this mech I found on Google Images, the most reliable of sources. Dark green with perhaps a bit of golden trim. Given that this battle took place in the dead of night, it's not unrealistic
Yeah, you can't see
to
that in the
assume
fucking
the last
forest.
thing a few of Amaris's goons saw was the flash of a mech's main gun before they came down with a terrible case of explosions. That disease,
Oof.
to complete the Team 4-star reference, was highly infectious. Entire companies of the Dragoons were wiped to the last man, others reduced to uselessness even if a couple of them managed to bug out. Every time they would manage to land a hit on the Black Watch, it was like their ammo had been replaced with Nerf darts, and they would return fire with much greater effect. Years of training specifically to fight the Black Watch proved beyond useless. Honey Schmidt and her 8 soldiers fought like they were possessed, giving no quarter and taking no prisoners. As I said earlier, terrain helped beyond forcing a close quarters engagement. It rendered the massive numerical superiority of Amaris's forces near useless, as they couldn't bring their full might to bear against the Black Watch. And while elsewhere on the planet SLDF forces were falling, it was here that the fighting mattered most, and they could not break through. As for why they couldn't just go around, for one, that would mean wasting valuable time that Amaris didn't have. Two, that would mean they would lose the momentum against the Black Watch, who would be free to engage them at their own pace.
Also disgusting terrain.
Dragoon's forces coming to kill them. Things were getting beyond desperate for Amaris. The Black Watch Marines fighting his bodyguards were getting closer and closer to him, and it didn't look like they were going to take him into custody in anything but a body bag. Despite the Black Watch losing a few mechs of their own, the Dragoons' losses were far greater. And blowing the gun off a Black Watch mech just meant it was going to come and beat you to death with your own leg after it ripped it off. The colonel in charge of the Dragoons was getting similarly desperate. From his point of view, they had nuked the home of where these demons were all supposed to be, and then 9 of them survived to hand their asses to them on a silver platter. Some ways left no survivors, save for the Black Watch waiting for the next to come.
Good for the morale, I guess.
Ash as every attack was repulsed. With the approval of Amaris, the commander decided to end things the only way he thought would work. What was left of the Dragoon forces surrounded the Black Watch as the closest thing they could get to a safe distance, throwing every single piece of ordnance they had, and by sheer weight of manpower keeping the Black Watch from moving. This still wasn't working, but it wasn't supposed to. Fighters flying overhead dropped 2 nuclear weapons on top of the Black Watch and their own soldiers, blowing everything in the flats to Kingdom Come. It's worth noting that when this happened, there were still 5 Black Watch mechs returning fire at the surrounding forces. Even after fighting against the enemy's elite force, after dozens of mechs, hundreds of other vehicles, and thousands of infantrymen threw themselves at the Black Watch, they had managed to destroy a grand total of 4 out of 9 Black Watch mechs.
Jesus Christ.
The tattered remnants of the Dragoons marched their way to the palace where Amaris was moments away from having his head ripped off, eliminating the Black Watch Marines storming the palace and saving Amaris just barely. All that remained of those 9 brave soldiers in the flats was the hand of a Highlander mech. It isn't officially stated anywhere that it was found flipping the bird at the Dragoons, but I like to believe
it probably was.
According to the history most people in the setting would be familiar with, this was the end of the Royal Black Watch Regiment, face-tanking nuclear bombs and refusing to die no matter the odds up until the very end. But, I mean, come on. Haven't you been listening? Nukes didn't do the Black Watch in the first time around. What makes you think this time would be any different? As it turns out, not all of the Black Watch was present that fateful day. One Elizabeth Hazen was visiting her brother who had been injured in a fighter crash when Amaris and company threw their little coup. Managing to escape the hospital before it was bombed, she and several other SLDF forces formed the Ghosts of the Black Watch, a resistant movement that would give Amaris hell for the rest of his life. Joining them was one Colleen Schmidt, the granddaughter of the same Honey Schmidt who nearly sent the 4th Dragoons to hell in a handbasket on the Gorst Flats. I know there's no bloodline magic in this setting, ignoring whatever garbage the clanners seem to think, but it seems that once your family gets into the Black Watch, badass runs in it for all time. For a decade, they would play merry hell with Amaris' occupation forces. Amaris would keep sending assassins after them, which translates to Amaris kept losing assassins to them. And when General Kerensky finally managed to fight his way back to Terra with the rest of the SLDF forces, these two met up with him after he had fought his way to where they were. They gave him every bit of intelligence he could possibly need about the situation on Terra, and in return, they only asked to be allowed to take the fight to Amaris one last time. Kerensky allowed them to do so, and one last time did the Black Watch cause Amaris to reconsider not wearing dark khaki pants. After Kerensky executed Amaris, these two women followed him alongside most of the remaining Star League defense force to the deep periphery, where they and their descendants would eventually come to form the clans. As for the Black Watch itself, its story doesn't quite end there. The regiment proper does, but its memory would live on. The Northwind Highlanders would go on to recover the hand of the Highlander that survived the battle, holding it as an almost sacred relic. In time, they would also form a secret company of soldiers dubbed as what else but the Black Watch. It would come to be tested when the Second Star League formed in response to the clan invasion. They decided to prove themselves before offering their services as the new defenders of the First Lord, and fought a bloody battle against Clan Smoke Jaguar after revealing themselves to an expeditionary force heading towards the Jaguar's homeworld. Wearing the insignia of the old regiment, Smoke Jaguar forces were enraged at what they saw as brazen disrespect for the now legendary Black Watch of old. Which is funny, because neither Colleen Schmidt nor Elizabeth Hazen founded that clan, but Smoke Jaguar is dedicated to nothing if
who
not being the
cares?
biggest bunch of assholes in the setting, short of those guys who thought Jerome Blake's word involved nuking half the Inner Sphere. The new Black Watch survived the battle with only 2 or 3 mechs intact, but returned the Inner Sphere to rebuild anew and become the new Royal Guards of the First Lord. Perhaps not as glorious a performance as the original Black Watch, but if nothing else, they proved they were just as ready to take to the field. Then the Blakist Jihad happened. Reportedly, the Black Watch was destroyed as once more the Star League came under assault, but by this point I'm sure you know how this
No,
saga
they weren't.
Survivors would go on
Those
to
are not.
rescue the son of House Kuru,
These are
the
not
ruler
dying.
from a Blakist prison camp, and would fittingly rename themselves as the Ghosts of the Black Watch in honor of what once was. Hunted by Word of Blake forces, they would suffer losses in every encounter they faced, but as is fitting to tradition, they simply refused to die. Information I could find in the last battle they partook in shows them walking into a trap and escaping at the cost of the life of one Lauren Jaffray, their commander. Because even after over 400 years, the Black Watch is too angry, too skilled, and most importantly, too goddamn stubborn to die. Now, their history is over, but if you'll let me, there's a couple thoughts of my own I'd like to give. I don't think the Star League Civil War would have turned out differently had the Black Watch been entirely eliminated at the start, at least in its ultimate outcome. I'm sure Kerensky would have dick-slapped Amaris into a well-deserved grave either way. To say otherwise is insulting to the man. But
he would have.
Last stand, I propose that perhaps things could have turned out much, much differently. Amaris' 4th Dragoons were some of the best, if not the very best, he had ever had, and the Black Watch made them look like children playing soldier. Without their intervention, the Dragoons would have at most faced whatever outnumbered and outgunned Assodia forces remained after they had rescued them from the Black Watch Marines at the Cameron Palace. The Northwind Highlanders may not have formed their own Black Watch had things turned out differently, not taking the fight to the clans and defending the 2nd Star League as it did because the unit they had helped fill in old times couldn't even get out of their home base when it was most needed. And most importantly, without the thrashing they gave Amaris' goons, Terra could have been much more well defended with these highly trained soldiers still being around. It would have still fallen, but I believe that cost would be immeasurably higher. And if this is the case, when Kerensky took his soldiers away from the Inner Sphere to eventually form the clans, perhaps things would have turned out far different than they did. Maybe with less forces arriving in the deep periphery due to increased combat losses, the clans would have had a much harder time forming and wouldn't be able to invade the Inner Sphere until much later, if at all. Or maybe they would have been able to unify easier as a simple result of there being less people to fight amongst themselves in their early history. Or maybe, just maybe, the clan's history would be vastly different. Having seen worse comment they did in the canon timeline, perhaps the clans would have a new outlook on life, throwing away warfare and old loyalties entirely as a result of the horrors they saw on a vastly more well-defended Terra. This is, of course, all just food for thought. Maybe nothing would change, and I'm talking entirely out of my ass. Trying to imagine a timeline where the clans never invade and Comstar doesn't have to put them in their place at Tukayed and can keep merrily blowing up old warships other people found in a bin somewhere. And as for my claim that they're perhaps the best bodyguards in fiction, allow me to backtrack just a bit. They may not be able to protect you. Some weasel can sabotage your mech or poison your drink or whatever crap you can imagine, and there's only so much they can do about that. They aren't wizards. But on the field of battle, there's no one else who would want keeping you safe. And even if they can't keep you alive, you can rest easy, knowing they're going to make sure to send as many people as they possibly can to apologize to you personally in the afterlife. And thus ends my telling of the legendary Black Watch. While I was able to hold myself back for most of the video from any intentional references, there's one last thing you should know about these people. In the words of Tex of the Black Pants Legion, to the Black Watch, nukes are merely inconvenient. Thank you for watching, and beyond that, thank you for getting me to 100k subscribers. I don't really know how to say thank you in a way that's meaningful. You've all given me a lot of stability in my life, a job, and a way of earning income. And most importantly, something that helped me keep going at a time where I had no idea what the hell I was going to do with myself in life. The support you've given from videos to branching out into other topics like Halo and now BattleTech to supporting me when I have a sponsor segment in videos has been unbelievable, and I can't say thank you enough. If that was a bit too savvy for you, the shit posting in my Discord and streams has always been good for a laugh. And of course, thank you to my channel.
He's a treasure of a human being. Go support his channel.
All of you truly have my thanks from the bottom of my heart. Thanks for watching, thank you once again, and take care out there.
Oh no, not the Electa counts.
Alright, 100k. Time to celebrate. Someone get me a goddamn Carl Franz body pillow. Put Marathi on the other side too, actually. Who do I need to go to commission that?
I'm the wrong person, sadly. But yeah, bye-bye.